Alright, so we're going to begin a new chapter, Chapter 9, Lesson 1, the probability of simple events. And as we begin here to define what probability is the chance that an event may occur. So think about things where there would have different odds, rolling a dice, or choosing a card from a deck of cards. Really, probability can be a variety of things, and a couple of kind of key terms that we're going to look at here that kind of break down probability into a little bit more detail is that probability exists between 0 and 1, with 0 being 0% chance of something occurring, all the way up to 1, which would actually stand for 100% chance of occurring. And you will see that most of the time events do not fall in one of these two extremes. They'll fall somewhere in the middle because there's usually some chance. Think about like the chance of raining. Like every day there's usually somewhat of a chance of rain. Maybe it's only 10% chance, maybe it's a 80% chance, but it's definitely not usually the extremes of absolutely no chance or it's certain to happen being 100%. And so that's what the next couple of terms kind of break down. A probability of 0 means it is impossible to occur. So if I gave you a bag full of marbles that were all red and I asked you to draw a green marble, then the probability of selecting that green marble would be 0 because there are no green marbles in the bag. A probability of 1, the same scenario if I gave you a bag of all red marbles and I asked you to choose a red marble out of the bag, you would have a 100% chance of choosing that because there is only one type of marble in the bag. Again, these are usually the extremes. Now, a probability that would be halfway in the middle would be 0.5. It could also be written as a fraction, 1/2. You'll see that on the homework that it's going to ask for fractions, decimals, and percents. But when we get to the Google form where you'll submit your assignment, you will only see that you have to use fractions there. So just really understanding that probability can be written in 3 different forms, but for the sake of what we're going to be doing on the assignment, you only have to do those as fractions. So a probability of half would be like flipping a coin. A coin has 2 sides, heads and tails, so you have a 50-50 chance of getting either heads or tails. So that's what it means, the probability of being 0.5. If you took all the probabilities of all the outcomes and added them up, it would equal 1. So back to the example of a coin, if it's 50-50, 50% chance of getting heads, 50% chance of getting tails, those together give you 100%, which tells you the probability of 1 when they're added together. Okay, so let's start going into, well, I guess there's one more term here first. The complement are all the possibilities that are not the event, and sometimes actually that's what we're trying to find the probability of. The probability of not getting a certain color of marble, or the probability of not choosing a certain card. And that's kind of dealing with this term here, the complement. Alright, so now we're ready for some examples here. A lot of our answers are going to be set up as fractions, where the number of favorable outcomes over the number of possible outcomes. And this is really kind of like what you're after out of the total number of possibilities that exist in the event. And I think that'll make more sense when you look at these next couple problems, just keeping in mind that we are going to use fractions. You'll see that in all the answers. This just talks about converting fractions and decimals. You don't really have to worry about this in the assignment, but we know with a fraction to a decimal, you divide the numerator by the denominator, and then once it is a fraction, if you move the decimal 2 places to the right, it would turn it into a percent. Alright, so here's example number 1. A coin is tossed. Find the probability of the coin landing on heads. Write your answers a fraction, a decimal, and a percent. Well, as we already said, if a coin has 2 sides, then you would have a 50-50 chance of getting either one of those. So 50-50 written as a fraction would be 50 out of 100, and that reduced would be 1/2. So we could write that a couple of different ways here. We can write it as the fraction 1/2, or 1 divided by, this should be 1 divided by 2, not 1 divided by 5, would be 0.5. and then that would also be a 50% chance. But you're really only going to have to worry about the fractions on your assignment today. So another example here, the spinner is spun once. Find the probability of each event. Write each answer as a fraction, a percent, and a decimal. So when it says it like in this format, it's the probability of F. So if we look over here, F is one section on the spinner, and there are 10 total sections. If you count these all up, there are 10 total sections. A good way to see it is that there are 5 on this side, and then starting at the F going up to J, there's 5 on this side. So there's 10 total things, and F only occupies one of those 10. So the probability of this one would be 1/10 for the probability of landing on the F space. Now here, the probability of landing on D or G, there is one D section and there is one G section. So now there are 2 sections that we could get out of 10, and 2 out of 10 reduced would be 1/5. And then finally, a vowel, that would be A, E, I, O, and U, but in our spinner we only have A, E, and I, so then the probability would be 3 out of 10. And so if I advance the slide, you'll see all of those examples here with both fractions, decimals, and percents, 1/10, 2/10, and then 3/10. So in these 3 examples, the one that would be more likely to occur would be the 3/10. You're more likely to get a vowel on any spin than you are to spin a D or G or an F, just because these are a lower chance of happening, right? This is 30% chance, 3 out of 10 of occurring. This is only 20%, and this is 10%. The question doesn't ask us to compare those at all, but this is the 3 answers in fraction form as they occur in the spinner. All right, and I kind of talked about these before when we had bags of marbles. It's a really common example for probability. A bag contains 5 blue, 8 red, and 7 green marbles. A marble is selected at random. That phrase is a big phrase that's often used in probability because there's no choice in the matter. It's all random, and that's really what probability deals with, is more of a random event, not something that you have a whole lot of control about. I guess it could be that. So here, we first need to know the total number of marbles that are existing in the bag, because that's going to be the total number of outcomes. So that's where we would add together the 5, the 8, and the 7. Well, 5 and 8 equal 13. 13 plus 7 would be 20. So there are 20 total outcomes that exist in this scenario, and it says find the probability of the marble not being red. So this is the one we're looking at the complements. We're not after the red marbles, we're after the other 2 colors. So blue is 5 and green is 7, so together that creates 12. So the probability would be 12 out of 20. You can see that here. I added 5 and 7 together to get 12, and then 12 over 20 would be 3/5. So there's our probability of 3/5, and then that would be 6 over 10 or 60 over 100, so it's a 60% chance of occurring. Again, we only have to have fraction form for that. So that's just a couple of examples of simple probability. Simple probability because there's only one thing that we're really after occurring. Probability becomes a little bit more complex after this point as we move on, and we'll start talking about compound events and multiple things occurring. So keep in mind, on your answers today, everything's in fraction, the outcome you're looking for out of the total possible outcomes, and then notice that I always did reduce my fractions into lowest terms as well. So I didn't leave my answer as 12 over 20, I reduced it to 3/5. I think that'll do it for lesson 1, and just make sure that you are answering the problems and putting those in the Google form and then submitting that to either myself or to Mrs. Klein so that we can record those and you'll get immediate feedback with the results. Thanks.